Hey everybody, Edo here, and for today's leak video, I am going to talk to you about the Panda Design Guide. Now listen, I've worked with Panda. We did Liftoff, Get Me Off This Planet together, but after that, I've worked with other printers. My current printer is Watts Games. They're who I am working on Sunset Over Water, which is coming out on Kickstarter in just a month. But in working with printers and all sorts and looking at Longpack and other groups, you oftentimes have to jump right into that process. Like as a Kickstarter creator, you probably have never worked with a printer before. And all printers are trying to help, right? They want you to do a good job. They want to work with you. Panda has a lot of middle management that assists, but even when you're working with a Longpack or you're working with Watts or any of these companies, they're always there to help you. But I have never seen a design guide as awesome as this one that Panda's. And I met with them just to catch up because I hadn't, they're friends. And they showed me this, and I asked them if I could go through it, right? You know what, and it's available on their site, but the Panda Design Guide is so good, even if you're not using Panda. If you're using any other printer, I highly recommend you read this thing. I'm actually going to leaf through it for you so you can see it, but you can download it. And again, this isn't me saying you should work with Panda. I happen to like Panda, but I like other printers. There's tons of great printers out there. What I'm saying is you should read this. The other thing Panda has is an example or a set of components. This is something they do a very nice job on, and I'll probably flip it open when I turn the camera around, but this is something you will find from other printers and you should get. Watts has one, Longpack has one. Almost every printer will have a sample pack. Some of them are nicer than others, but this is not uncommon. Getting a good one of these is pretty common, and you can just request it. Again, other companies do have guidelines, but I've never seen one as professionally, incredibly put together as this one. And I just want to share it because it's so useful if you are a graphic designer or you are a game maker going to print. So I'm going to flip the camera around and jump to it. Thanks. All right, so let's jump in. This is the Panda Design Guidebook. I will open this up, and to start, it has a little bit of a intro and a table of contents. Even has a little guide to Panda Tip, warning or downloadable file. I mean, again, this is the execution level of this document. It's just stellar. But let's keep moving. So on this page, it's talking about file preparation at a glance, talking about different software you could be using, InDesign, Illustrator, Photoshop. There's, what software you use isn't so important, but, make sure you know how you're using it. And then just basic pieces. You're going to be submitting everything as PDF. You want to have a CMYK color format. We'll talk more about that later. It's talking about the color profile to use in the program that you're using, your pixels per inch, your PPI. These are really important basics you need to keep in mind if you are preparing files. Talking about margin, talking about pure black, talking about things being properly named. All these are really basic items we'll go through as we go through the rest of it. Please do not use Photoshop to create your final PDF files. This is an interesting bit here, again, suggesting InDesign. The more professional you are, the more software you'll have access to, but it's just talking about best practices. So you might not be able to do every best practice, but moves on to file requirements, talking about file format, your color setting. Again, if you RGB, CMYK, you don't want to be using RGB for print. You want to be using CMYK. RGB, red, green, blue is light sources. When you're using lights, CMYK is for when you're using inks. And that's a really important distinction, and you can go see more about that somewhere else, but talking about image resolution and margin bleeds. I mean, this to a degree is a repeat of that sort of file prep as a glance, but again, then they start talking about other resources you can download from their site. And again, in talking with Panda, they were comfortable with this idea that this isn't necessarily only for people doing work with Panda. So to some degree, in terms of file requirements, it talks about what pure black is, and that's really important for text. And it's got the CMYK value in here. It's also recommending how you save and name your files. This is a huge deal. People oftentimes, and artists are sometimes the worst, but product and design, lots of people do it differently, don't have a consistent naming structure for their games. And it's just so important if you're going to send a printer 20 files that they need to worry about. They need to be named in a way that your project's always clear and up front and what the file is. So it makes a huge deal, and it talks about deleting the original and just being consistent with your file naming leads to less mistakes. It is a huge deal. File naming is important. It says to include your die line files and is noting that there's templates. Okay, so let's talk here about bleeds and margins. There's an example here. You'll see this example lots of places where you have the margin line, the die line or trim line, and the bleed line. Like that's pretty standard. You'll see that in GameCrafter. It just describes it here. It talks about different sizes for different types of components and how to think about margin. This is just good to get used to. Most graphic designers and people making card and board games are familiar with this, but you definitely want to keep it in mind. You don't want text to be cut off and you don't want to have image issues with your design. So bleed and margin is important. Let's keep moving. This is just a fabulous example of how offset CMYK printing works and how the different colors are laid together, how pure black is made, how each of the different colors are blended to make the set. And here this idea of rich black, which isn't pure black, it's like the richer version of black, but it has other colors in there and how that's created. So for those who don't know and understand CMYK, this is just a great one-pager on it. Color and resolution, talking about your PPI, your color modes, your color profiling. These are all important over here. It even talks about how to do it from a Photoshop perspective, so that's super useful. Moving along, hey, game boxes. Here's a two-piece game box. Please make sure your component fits. Those are really important. How to handle your bleed. It's got an example of the template file that you can get from them, and talking about how the top and the bottom have to be adjusted slightly so that your cover fits correctly down onto the box. So that's really important. It's referencing a box marking section we'll get to later. And again, I'm moving through this quickly. This has already been 5 minutes. I just want to give a little extra information, but otherwise you should just read this thing. Talks about tuck boxes, margins, how to handle foil packs, and just all of those different things that go into that kind of card game. And then we move on to box markings and customs, right? So here's a section, talks about required markings. The next one has required and recommended. Talks about the different, the UPC, age warning and child warning, the CE mark. Lots of good information there. And examples. Now, again, this is Panda, but you might not use the Panda logo, but you do need to consider, the made in China bit. And then when we move over here, more of those requirements, as well as recommended markings like company address, play time, and number of players. All very important things worth understanding, and this is a good quick guide to it. The game board. Breakdown of the game board, bleed size, how to handle double printing, maximum size. Again, they have their examples, but it's just a really nice look at how a cut will be laid out and how to think about the overlay and the die cut, or that's the fold cut, if you will, the folder. Good information here. Same thing moves with cards, bleed and margin, file format, color, how to, the border black versus deep black, and how to handle a card inventory sheet. It then has some examples of Panda type formats, but there are many others, but these are pretty common. GameCrafter has a good set. Now, this is a place where if you have one of these packs, every printer, almost, from my experience, will have one of these, or equivalent of this, which is a deck of cards that are all blank that show the different card stocks and card qualities for here. So 310 linen black core, 310 GSM ivory core, and gray core. So those are really useful when you're thinking about card quality. Also, if you play a game from a Kickstarter creator, you usually can find out what they printed. So I'll open the rest of this, but that just was a good reference point. So good information here. Talks about different card corners you can get. moving along. I mean, this is exhaustive, right? So saddle stitch, perfect binding, spiral, case wrap, talking about booklets, number of pages, margin, how margin changes with more pages. You know, if you're getting into giant booklets, what to keep in mind. So the the update on booklets and paper sheets is really great here. Punch board, really good examples of how to think of a punch board. Look at that, talking about die molds and you know, saving your die line as a different file than your artwork, not just on your artwork. That's always risky. You can get die lines printed on your unit and your components. Labeling and numbering, a really good example on this next side about how to think about combining sheets. So rather than doing 2 cuts of 4 and whatever this is, 12, you can do 2 and 6 and do this twice, and that will be cheaper for you. That's a better use of it. Talks about front work, artwork, and back, and just gives some good examples and ideas on how to handle that. Again, along the same lines, looking at the how to handle shared die lines or folded die lines and that kind of thing. So in double layer punch boards, all sorts of examples. Like, I mean, look at this. How to do the perfect place to hold cubs and meeples. I like how all their examples have pandas, but this is the double layer technique. We're looking for that for Skulk Hollow. So really good info there. Cardboard and matte screens. Good information here. This is pretty straightforward, but they give good examples. Stickers for the inside, for putting in as sticker sheets, but also for putting on the outside of the box. Spot UV, foil stamping. These need to be their own PDFs. A lot of important information here. That's sort of the advanced, style for that. Hey Panda, pro move. Maybe you could get some foil on this single page. Wouldn't that be super cool? Anyway. And then talking about components. Here's what a view is going to look like. Here's the information you need. Here's the layout. When I send my component information to a printer, it literally looks like this. It's got the dimensions, it's got the side view, it's got the color, and then and the number. So this is the kind of thing you need to be doing. And then it has a glossary. I'm not going to go through the glossary, but it has a glossary. So from my perspective, this is a must review read for anyone making board or card games. Even if you're not working with Panda, it is just so useful, so much good information. Not every detail, and there may be adjustments that other printers ask for you should be aware of, but it's such a great intro document that just kudos to them for making this and creating value. Just for those curious, and again, you can ask for this, but to see what the rest is that's in here, we went through, they say, hey, look, we have cards, cool. And then we have our little bags. And then in the bags, we have stuff. Set this bag aside. Little mini unboxing. They show off cubes. They show off their Panda miniatures. They've been doing a lot of miniature work. Meeple work. Just more components. What are these? I'm not sure. Little see, maybe tokens you can move and see something underneath, or somebody's going to tell me exactly what those are. Here's another. Oh, I bet you. No, these go for the. Oh, no, I don't know. Anyway, so these are for the hit marker where you put these together. Panda punch board. There's some assembly in here. I think I could probably assemble this in a way. Maybe. Yeah, this makes something. You need some assembly instructions in here, Panda. Die, nice die. This is an example of the different, there's no way you're going to be able to read this, but the example of different card sizes. And then some really fancy schmancy coins. So these are cool. And you can give them to your kids after you've looked at them. Anyway, so hopefully this was helpful. I really recommend checking it out. Subscribe, share, all that good stuff. Most importantly, play some great games.